So we're going to take a look here at the Sony ZVE1 Sony full frame camera. When you get these things, there are a lot of menu items. It can be a bit overwhelming, so I'm going to go through and tell you what my cinematic menu settings are to help you get you on your way to making better videos. And I have lots of other videos on the channel as well with things like lighting, framing, lots of things that will contribute even more to that. But getting the settings right is the first step. Now, when you get in here, there's all these options here. You got my menu, these mains. This is video stuff, exposure, focus, playback, connectivity, and other options. So as we start out here, I'm gonna actually come here last because this is something that you customize. But here, something I like on these newer Sony cameras is they have these two main menus, and it makes everything a lot easier to access. So we have frame rates here, shutter speed, ISO, aperture, white balance picture profiles, and if you want to overlay LUTs and what kind right here for those picture profiles, you have your file format, whether it's 4K, Full HD, and then you also have here where you can pick your color sampling and your bit rate, and then down here other options like proxy recording, wind noise reduction, audio record level. I'm going to go over all these settings in more detail as we go through the camera, but these are the things that you can quickly access here on this screen so that you don't necessarily need to go in and assign so many different my menus like I used to have about 4 of these on my other cameras so that I could quickly get to the things that I need and use most often. So starting out with image quality, I typically shoot an XAVC-S 4K. I'll sometimes use SI if I'm doing something like a short film. This is going to give you the highest quality, but it's also really high bitrate footage and takes up a lot of space. This is economical and will get you really good image quality as well. HS is one of the lower ones that uses the lowest bitrate. The movie settings, you've got frame rates. I'm typically using 24 for my normal timelines, and if I'm going to slow something down, I use 60 frames per second. You have the option of 120, and you can get really slow motion with that, but 24 and 60 is typically my go-to. I only use 120 if I have plenty of lighting because of the higher shutter speed. And then again, you have your different bitrate and color sampling options there. I like to always choose the higher one so I get the best quality in that setting because that's why I got the camera. And this is all touchscreen as well, but I'm going to use the pad here so that I'm not getting my fingers in front of the camera and getting fingerprints all over. S&Q settings, I don't mess with this, but you can set up how you want it to do slow motion for you or time lapses. I like to do that stuff myself, and there's time lapse settings for that. Log shooting settings, you can turn this on, and then you have these two different options for your color gamut, and then you can embed a LUT file on there. I typically use picture profiles instead of just the log shooting. You have proxy settings here, so if you were to turn that on, what this does is records a much lower quality image when you're recording your videos, and then when you go to editing, if you have a computer that's a bit slower and can't keep up with these high bitrate 4K recordings, then you can record that lower quality footage and then apply all of your edits to that final 4K video instead of having to constantly wait for it to lag and render trying to edit the 4K video. My computer is fast enough so it's not an issue, but you do have that option available. APS-C mode, on this camera it's grayed out because I'm in 4K. This is a 12 megapixel sensor, so you have to use the whole sensor for 4K, but if you wanted to go to full HD, then you can actually crop in on the sensor and use the APS-C mode. Lens compensation, I keep these all on auto. Then breathing compensation is a cool new thing they have on these cameras. On these portrait lenses, the lens focal length changes a tiny bit if you're racking focus from one thing to the other. It doesn't matter for pictures because you're taking a picture, but in video, you don't want the focal length looking like it's zooming in and out a little bit when you're racking focus. You turn on this breathing compensation and it's going to punch in just a bit on your image and then compensate automatically when you're racking focus so that it's not getting any of that change in focal length. So that's a useful tool to have for a more professional looking video. Format, you go in there, format your memory card, and that'll erase everything and set it up to record your images. Just make sure if there's something on there already that you transfer it to your computer first. Cover image database, I've had that happen once where I've had a memory card issue. It kind of freaks you out when the message pops up, but it worked out fine. And display your media info there. There you go. Write serial number, I have off. File settings, you can choose what you want your file names and how they're numbered. I just leave it how it is and rename them once they're on my computer. Shoot mode, I'm always doing manual exposure because I want control over the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. But if you want to use one of those other modes, it is available for you there. Camera set memory, this is pretty cool because you can go ahead, say you're filming somewhere and you need to switch quickly between being able to shoot 24 frames per second, 60 or 120, you're going inside and outside at different times. You can set all that up ahead of time with your shutter speeds, your frame rates. You can change your white balance for those different lighting settings, and then you just click on the memory recall, pick the one that you need for that setting, and then click it, and the camera's set rather than you having to try to switch all those different settings and missing something important. Silent mode settings, I don't use. Release without lens is enabled. I don't touch that. Audio recording is on. Record level, it's set at 22 right now, but I typically use a mic that's compatible with the hot shoe mount. It's the Sony ZVE1, I think, with their crazy names. But if you're plugging in a different kind of microphone, depending on the setting, this is what allows you to change the volume of the record level. Audio out time is live. Wind noise reduction is off because I don't want it doing any kind of compensation for me that I can't change later. Microphone directivity. So you've got the built-in mic here and you can change it to front, all directions, rear. So that can be useful if you're vlogging, depending on how the camera's facing or what's going on. And you can change what it allows you to do here as well. All this stuff more so applies if you're using external recording stuff. So you use according to that. Steady shot. So with this camera, you've got standard is what I typically use. I was doing some handheld stuff earlier and had it on active. That punches in a bit. Dynamic active punches in a lot more, and this doesn't have sensor stabilization on this camera, so it's all digital. So the more you do, the more it's going to punch in and you're going to lose some quality. Steady shot adjust I have set to auto, so if it recognizes what kind of lens you have, it automatically adjusts for that focal length, but otherwise you can put manual and select the focal length of your lens on there, like anyone has a 19mm. Let me know in the comments if you do. Framing stabilizer I have off. Zoom range, clear image zoom, that's what I like to use. So you can punch in up to 50% on your image and hardly lose any quality. You can also set the zoom lever speed, which I have here during recording, set to 4. But what that allows you to do is use this top toggle next to the power switch and zoom in on stuff and zoom out. Custom key settings and remotes, I don't mess with any of that. Grid line display is on and I use the rule of thirds grid. You can see here, you got a line going across there, down and down to help you frame things according to the rule of thirds and make a more pleasing shot. I have videos on that to help you out as well. Emphasize record display I have set to on. That pretty much just puts a red outline around the box when you hit record instead of just a little REC down there, because anything to help me know that I'm recording is good, because I've forgotten many a times and it's quite frustrating. Marker display is off, but if I turn that on, you can see here I have 235:1 set, and that's that 21:9 aspect ratio here, so I can frame my shots according to what that looks like. So if I'm going to edit in that cinematic looking aspect ratio, then I can frame accordingly when I'm filming. But normally I have that set to off unless I'm doing something like that. You also have center marker, safety zones, and guide frames you can add. I have this set to off. I don't use that. Cinematic vlog, I've never used that, or the self timer, or auto framing settings. Auto slow shutter I have set to off, but what that does is if you're using some kind of auto mode, it's not going to automatically take the shutter speed way down, which is going to change the look of your video quite a lot, because you want double the frame rate for your shutter speed to have normal looking motion blur. ISO, right now it's set to 80, that just depends on the time I'm shooting, but you have a range limit. This also only applies if you're shooting auto, so you can make it not go above or below a certain amount. Like you probably wouldn't want 409,000 on here. I have exposure step set to 0.3, I don't touch that. Metering mode, I typically use spot, but you also have these other options of center, multi. Sometimes I'll use that, but I'm almost always on spot. And you can also change a standard or a large spot. Face priority and multi-metering is off because I just use my spot to expose for people's faces, and then I keep the spot metering point in the center. White balance, you have all these presets you can use along with custom white balances if you have a card, but I'm typically always using the color temperature Kelvin settings here. So you can go in here, change it how you need, and then you can also go over one more to the right and fine tune a little more depending on what your setting is. Priority set and auto white balance, I just have the standard, but I don't use auto white balance. And this also applies to auto white balance. The shockless white balance is for a time where maybe you're going from one room to another where the lighting is different, or from inside to outside, and it'll slowly change the white balance instead of doing this massive automatic change if you're using auto, but that's another reason I don't like to use auto. Dynamic range optimizer is set to off because I don't want it doing any extra processing for me. I'll do my own color grading. Creative look, I typically use standard. Picture profile is set to off, but there's lots of picture profiles here and you can go in whichever ones you like and edit things more. There's lots of options here. If you want to change the gamma to something else, I used to use Cine 4 a lot. S-Log 3 is popular, and also Cinetone. Just see what you like for grading and make it work for you. And you can customize your own picture profiles here, but I typically just shoot with it off unless I'm doing something like a short film or something more important where I want more control. In managing user LUTs, you can actually import your own LUT. If you have one that you designed or that you typically use, you can import that to your camera, and so you can overlay that on your log footage or your picture profile so you can see what it's going to look like based on how you typically edit. Soft skin effect is off. I don't want extra processing. Zebras are off, but when I do turn it on, I like it set to 100 plus, so it just shows me what's overexposed. But if you want a little bit of a safety margin, there's lower options there for you. Focus mode, I'm usually always in continuous autofocus, or I'll just switch the lens manual focus toggle if I want to do that. Or if I'm using the touch autofocus, I can just touch whatever I want and it goes into a manual focus mode temporarily, and then you can use the zoom ring up front if you're wanting to do that. So it's an easy way to just touch the screen to turn it into manual pretty much until I cancel it. Transition speed and subject shift sensitivity, those are just middle of the range for each of these because that works fine for most situations. If I'm planning a shoot and I need to do something different, then I'll set it up ahead of time and have that ready to go. Have autofocus assist off. Focus area I have set to wide, and you have lots of options you can choose here for what you want. Focus area is white. I have this on does not circulate. Standard. Subject recognition autofocus is on, and it used to be just human and animals, and they've added lots of stuff here so you can choose what you want. I'm almost always in human, and you can select or deselect various things there, so they're not even options. Left and right eye select up to auto. You might want to turn on one or the other if maybe you're doing an over the shoulder shot and you want to make sure the closer eye's in focus, something like that, but that's situation dependent if I would change that. Subject recognition from display is on, so you get the box over top of the people. But then face memory here, this is a pretty cool setting. You can go in and take a picture of various people and save it to your camera, and if you pick one, it'll automatically focus on that person rather than anyone else in the frame. So say you're doing a wedding, you can make sure it's focused on the bride and not all the people standing around her when they're walking down the aisle. Or if you're doing a shot with a lot of people, you want it focused on that one special person. You set up ahead of time, have it set, and then it won't jump around from everyone else. And then you can turn on, and this is just what controls that being on or off. So you could put those faces in there, but you could also quickly turn it off and not just delete the faces. Focus map is off. The focus magnifier, that just takes you into the magnifying part, but I have it set to no limit, so it stays like that till I cancel it, and initial is 4x, because otherwise you have to click twice because you focus magnify one time and it doesn't do anything, so then you go to click it again for 4x. So one less button push. Peaking display is off, but when it's on, I typically have high and red, and say your scene is red and that's not helping, you can change to a different color. I don't change anything in the playback mode, so this just depends on what you like when you're watching your stuff. Except for this, delete confirm, I put delete first so I don't have to click delete and then go up and do an extra button push to go away from cancel to hit delete. But aside from that, I don't mess with any of those. Same with here, there's only a couple things I changed the connectivity, and that is to turn Wi-Fi off, to turn Bluetooth off, and then also I turn on airplane mode because I don't want it wasting battery searching for Wi-Fi signals or Bluetooth signals or anything like that. This is self-explanatory, your language, where you live, NTSC and PAL. NTSC is what gives you 24, 60, 120, 240, all those different frame rate options, and then PAL is what gives you the 25, 50, 100 multiples of that, and it just depends on what country you're in and what is being used. But I'm an NTSC. I have videos on that as well that explain why that is. And then you can save your settings on here. It's probably a good idea because it takes a long time to go through these. So for the custom key dial settings, this is nice because you can customize just about every button on this camera. So the way I like to do it is I have the white balance set to this C2 here. The marker display is the trash can. So when we go on here, that gives me that 21:9 aspect ratio marker. And you notice when you turn that on, the rule of thirds goes away because it wouldn't make sense to have it in there because it wouldn't be the same ratio where the thirds fall. So keep that in mind. But then I have steady shot set to the center so I can quickly toggle between that standard and active. Zebra display is on the left, peaking display is on the right, focus magnifier is on the bottom. Then I have metering mode up on this top right. Movie shooting I just left with the red button how it is. And then I don't assign anything to this focus hold button because not all my lenses have it. And you can set other custom settings here. I like to have this set to aperture and shutter speed, and then ISO for the wheel here. So this says ISO, but I don't want to have to click and do it. I just like being able to change it really quickly. You can also have custom settings that are separate for your pictures and for playback, but I don't do that. Function menu, I don't set anything special for the picture mode, just video. So I've got autofocus transition speed, subject shift sensitivity, the zoom speed and recording for that little toggle up here if I'm using the clear image zoom, zebra level, picture profile, and the gamma display type, APS-C shooting, steady shot, audio record level, the peaking, color, level, and display. So if I was to give the camera to someone else that didn't know what all my custom settings were, you could at least hit function and get to all those main things I typically use and have assigned to other things. So your display screen, you can choose what shows up there. I just leave it how it is. When you click through the display options, record with shutter is off. This custom key dial setting, it's the same thing, but it takes you down to that part of it. My dial settings, you can control other stuff here as well. For more customization, the aperture, shutter speed, rotation is normal. Dial wheel lock is unlocked, so I can change things while recording. Touch operation is set to on. And then shooting screen, I have set to on for the shooting screen and on for the footer icon touch, but I have these off because if you watch this, now when I swipe, those show up, which is fine. That can be useful to have, but I don't like anything covering up my screen where I'm trying to see what I'm recording. So I just leave those off and I have them set to buttons for whatever I need. But you want to make sure the shooting screen's on because that's what allows you to touch autofocus and tracking, which you have the option to choose between here. I typically always use focus, but if you did want to touch something like a person or car or something and have it track the focus on that as it goes by, then that is quite useful. Playback screen is on, menu screen is on for the touch functions. Screen reader, this basically when you turn on just reads out everything you're going over, so don't need that in my case. Monitor brightness, I like setting to manual and full bright so that I get the best colors and exposure for everything and make it look right. Display quality is high. If you get your camera and stuff doesn't look great initially, it's defaults to standard and go to high. It's going to use more battery, but it's kind of important to make sure you have a good image. Monitor flip directions auto for when you're flipping the screen around. That's set to counter. This gamma display assist is for if you want to overlay the LUTs for your picture profiles, options there, or custom ones that you've made that you want to load onto the camera. Auto review is off. I have auto monitor off, but I do have power save start time set to 5 minutes. So if I walk off or forget I leave it on or something, it's going to go dark and not use as much battery. Both linked power off temp is high, so this is going to let you record longer if the camera starts getting hot. If you do this on a consistent basis and it shuts itself down because it gets so hot, that's probably not good for your camera, but this is just a backup. If I'm outside shooting, it's really hot to make sure it doesn't just die on me. Volume settings, this is playback stuff. It's going to depend on your situation and what you're doing. Same thing with USB connections and HDMI. This is all for if you're using an external monitor, and that will be situation dependent for what kind you have. Have the record lamp set to on. I don't mess with any of this stuff. You can see the version here in case you want to update your software and see your lens software version. And that brings us back to this My menu that I told you about earlier. You can go in here and set up your own menu items, add, delete, move things around. But these are things that I want to be able to get to quickly. Formatting, time-lapse settings, lens compensation like that breathing we talked about. If I want to turn it on or off. Marker display with the aspect ratio marker because the 235 to 1 is what I use, but there's other options like 4:3 if you want that old TV look, or a vertical aspect ratio 1:1 for square, depending on your situation. Zebra display and level, touch operation, those camera set memories, interval shooting for time lapses, the zoom lever speeds, some autofocus settings with peaking. And those are all of my cinematic settings for the ZVE1. I know that's a lot and you probably have some questions, so post them down below. Other videos again on the channel playlist with lots of things to help you make good videos, because the settings are where you start, but then understanding how all the lighting and framing and those things work is going to make even bigger difference. So let me know if you have any questions. Hit that thumbs up if you like the video. Subscribe for more good information on filmmaking, and I'll see you in the next one.